Hello and welcome to this episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV, in which we are looking at the role that the Indian Navy is already playing as a defender of India's coastlines and its sea dominations in the waters around the Indian subcontinent, but the role that the Navy would play in the coming years as clearly the Indian flag bearer and a force multiplier in the geostrategic scenario that is evolving in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. To that extent, the equipment that the Indian Navy needs, it is acquiring, and what it already has, which guarantees the security and safety of peninsular India, but also provides India the representative foothold in what is being talked about as perhaps the world's most important geostrategic partnership of the Indo-Pacific, the Quad. How the Indian Navy is going about its process of modernization and manufacturing the equipment that is needed for India and India's ambitions of tomorrow. This episode will discuss that and a lot more. As we look at the capabilities and capacities of the Indian Navy and how it is projected to go into the next few decades, we have two extremely well-informed experts with us who are naval officers but have credentials that go well beyond that. We have Admiral Puri with us, who has the unique distinction of having commanded the Fortran in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, having been Deputy Chief of the Navy, also then a C&C of the Eastern Naval Command, and most importantly thereafter, by choice, he chose to come to Delhi to become CISC, which is the key body, the key position really, that was the integrated headquarters of three services and looked at a number of force projections and acquisition requirements of the three services. He is now writing a number of important papers, telling the truth as it is about how we need to prepare for the future. And we have with us Commander Arnab Das, who is a naval officer but now a scholar of repute. He has done his master's and a PhD from the IIT, and after a 7-year stint there, moved on to set up the Maritime Research Center and looking at projections of preparing India in the underwater domain. Very, very important areas. And I'll start with you, Admiral Puri, sir. I've always respected your views because you tell it as it is. What we need to understand right now is the Navy up to the number of challenges that are being thrust on it, both for India's security along the coastlines and the extended domain of the much talked about Indo-Pacific and the partnerships that India is in?
Well, I would say like this, that the Navy, for the defense of what they call territorial integrity in the, here we have a coastline, the navies were always meant to be able to look after our interests at sea. And they really did not, the designers of yesteryears did not go look at specific threats, but said what sort of capabilities a naval force would require to be able to look after various interests that we have. Clearly, the interests are, at that point of time which we saw, were the resources that are available at sea, how would we, what sort of forces would be required for them, the requirement of possible force projection within the Indian Ocean region in various areas. I wouldn't like to go into the specifics of that. And we had to be in a position to be able to decisively deal with any combination or a force in our area, which would say is the Indian Ocean region and probably the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean region, and that we should be more powerful than any regional combination that can take place in this area. So those were the parameters within which the Navy was designed. I would say that not having gone after specific threats, because they were not very well definable at that point in time, was a very good strategy. And that is what has enabled the Navy today to be able to take on multifarious tasks which have now sprung up, which did not exist at a point in time. So I would, but having said that, our area of operation will largely remain the Indian Ocean region.
True.
Beyond that, it would have to be in partnership with some other country.
Point well taken, sir. In fact, I have learned and I have advocated in my own limited way that our strategic space really lies from the coast of Africa to the Straits of Malacca and everything in between. And to that extent, at least till now, the Navy is pretty much capable of handling our interests and even supporting the interests of other big powers. I'll come to you, sir, with another question linked with this. But let me ask Commander Das. Now, your work, interestingly, you were involved in service both with surface vessels and certain maritime underwater threat perceptions also. But now your focus is more on that. One area where there had been at least negative coverage about the Navy's capacity was submarines. I believe now Project 75I has been sanctioned and thousands of crores have been given towards it. Can you explain?
It is not just the platforms that we need to focus on. There is so much more that we need to take forward submarine deployment is not so simple. And I think the Navy has invested significantly. The platform that you mentioned, definitely the nuclear submarine project has been there and a whole lot of effort has gone into the whole indigenization program. Plus the conventional submarines also that are being kind of taken care of. But I would also like to mention that the Navy has invested significantly in the underwater capabilities in terms of having a proper course in IIT Delhi since the 70s. There's a specialized underwater electronics course. 5 officers have been deployed there every year for this MTech program. And also, there are multiple of us who have kind of done their PhDs in IITs, all as serving naval officers, starting right from Commodore Paul Raj, who I'm sure everybody knows him today, to I'm the 5th in the line. There are so many stalwarts before me who have contributed. And I think credit goes to Indian Navy for having invested on human resource plus and all of them have contributed significant projects. And now Navy has been directly investing on technology development.
Okay, so interesting. I just want to carry forward that question a bit, that if there is so much of investment in underwater capability, I believe there is a debate in South Block between what we need to go further with in terms of aircraft carriers or submarines. Just briefly sum that up.
So, in the tactical planning, I think earlier Navy was projecting the aircraft carrier force, the carrier battle group. I think the plans evolve over a period of time. And now Navy has definitely, parallelly there have been, we also have to take into account that we are part of a democracy and the resources will always be limited. So the way the Navy has been projecting, earlier there was a perception that it was the carriers which were being given more importance. But definitely Navy has done enough in terms of the submarine capabilities also. I mean, if you look at the Arihant project, I mean the nuclear submarine project, I think that's a huge project and there is a lot of investment that has gone into, and Navy has to balance. I mean, if you look at the technology requirements right from the underwater to the space, so in that whole balancing act, now I think there has been a focus on the submarine again.
Okay, so Admiral Puri wanted to come in to what you were saying. And Admiral sir, while you say what you have to, I'd like you to also throw a bit of light on the Navy's acquisition plans vis-a-vis the budgetary cuts. Just from the top of my head, the expectations of the Navy in the last 1 year or so was about 23,000 crores. They got about 19,000 crores. So it has fallen well below the expectations. So how would you suggest the Navy should prioritize?
See, in my view,
Sir,
this budgetary restraint will always remain with us. I don't see our being. We are dealing with a power whose their GDP is 5 times ours.
China.
I mean, you're dealing with that power. Even dealing with Pakistan is today dealing with China. I mean, their force levels are going to come from there. So you're dealing with a power whose GDP is 5 times yours. His defense budget is perhaps even more because there are a lot of hidden money going on there. He doesn't worry so much about welfare as we have to do. So therefore, this business of if we want to do things, perhaps as a CISC, what I thought, and I think to some extent that is being put into practice.
Ji.
Now we would really need to make probably a change of tack, that instead of, we will have to do what China did to be able to buy that time for them to build up to be able to face the Western powers. But basically it's a strategy to be able to deny the enemy an area of operations in which you want to protect, and anti-access area denial. I mean, that is broadly the strategy that Chinese followed, which meant they developed anti-shipping ballistic missiles, which become a threat to all big platforms, and with long range, invested into a submarine force. But at the same time, they knew one day they want to be a power which will contest. And while they bought themselves time with this strategy, they simultaneously built up their force. India would have to prioritize today, I feel, that we will have to go on anti-access area denial strategy within our Indian Ocean and create simultaneously also, we can't always remain defensive, create a force that will be a deterrent should the need arise.
So just
not just in
add on to your point, aren't we already doing it? Because I understand the Navy is, for example, engaging in mission-based deployments where they're looking at long-range reconnaissance by our aerial arm and helicopters. They're looking at endurance-related missions, both by submarines and ships. What more do we need to do?
I would put it this way, that we need a deterrent not just at the nuclear level, but also at the conventional level. And the only element that can provide you that deterrent today is what they call the SSN, the attack nuclear submarine.
Ji.
So we need to quickly invest into an attack nuclear submarine. And my personal view is that with whatever limitations, the fastest way to do it would be to take what we have done for Arihant and develop it as an attack submarine, that instead of ballistic missiles, it will carry more surface weapons, and that is the only platform that will have the endurance and the stealth capability to be able to act as a deterrent, and this force we should develop very fast.
Okay.
This is my one view.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Boliye.
Second thing is that we do need for anti-access to deal with the surface forces in our area. Also, a nuclear submarine is a better weapon today to take on that task, together with equivalent of what I would say we today have a BrahMos, but we probably something with longer range that can deal with which will have the capability of an anti-shipping ballistic missile.
Okay.
So that's sort of
they're very important points. Commander, I want to understand, and I want to build up on the Admiral's point, which is about SSN submarines. Now, we have been leasing them from Russia. I believe the latest to be leased is the Akula class SSN submarine. We call it Chakra 1, Chakra 2, Chakra 3, but basically they are nuclear subs. Two issues linked with it. One is leasing is a submarine with nuclear capability is a euphemism for actually having the capability to use it without having to go into this whole tizzy of America opposing what you're taking from Russians. And the other is, why are we not adding this in Project 75I as a possibility that why don't we also build it? We have built one, but why don't we look at having more submarines out of that Scorpion model that we were looking at? Why don't we play around with the budget a bit and focus more on this? Isn't this a greater deterrent?
I think, one has to appreciate that there is so much more investment that needs to go into the deployment part of a submarine. So, that requires a very different, if I can give you the background of how the Chinese
We don't have much time, but whatever.
How the Chinese have developed these underwater capabilities, they have built what is called an underwater Great Wall project. The complete deployment has to be, and like when we talk about Indo-Pacific, Indo-Pacific is a tropical construct. The entire Indo-Pacific is a tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Indian Ocean is definitely part of that. So the import of technology that we do from outside has to be customized to the tropical waters.
Okay.
Any sensor that you put or any platform that you put will not have the capabilities which you get when you are deployed in the, if you just go back to the Cold War era, what ranges you got and the capabilities that you got, that gets reduced more than 50% when you come into this. So there has to be a completely different strategy when we look at our waters.
And is INS Dhruva achieving
Definitely.
that
Yes,
extent?
absolutely. That's a very, very important step, and that is what is the acoustic capacity building that we are talking about. Unless we focus on the acoustic capacity building, the platform, the hardware is one aspect of it, but the soft acoustic capacity building will enhance our ability to get the most out of these deployments.
Okay, finally, Admiral sir, the Navy has a formidable air arm and it has the capacity to create force multiplication for the Navy's operations, from fighter jets to helicopters to submarine seeking helicopters to ships with helicopters mounted on them. Could you just briefly summarize what all missions that the air arm can achieve for the navies?
Well, one is the fundamental of precision-guided weapons and warfare that will take place is having a good reconnaissance capability. That can come from the satellites, and that requires long-range maritime patrol aircraft. So we definitely need these two elements, and the Navy is trying to going in for them. Only thing I would say is that a time has now come that we look at affordability of anything that we do.
Okay.
And for that, I think the Air Force has taken a very good step, that their next AWACS, they are not buying a new aircraft and trying to do everything. They are utilizing an aircraft from Air India, and even after it has done its passenger life, these aircraft still have about a 30-year life available with them. And on that, mounting the technology that they have developed for AEW&C already
in DRDO.
in DRDO, and getting their AVAX, because if they were to buy the same thing, the cost may be 2 to 3 times more than what it be now.
I'm aware.
I believe the Navy should go similarly in developing its air arm and maritime patrol capability, that we take a platform and the capabilities that have been developed for AEW&C would largely, as far as the surface surveillance is concerned, be good enough for our purposes at sea also. I mean, you will require some changes in technology to deal with different type of clutter, but that is all well within our capability. The other point comes is your underwater. We have the capability today to develop our own sonar buoys, to develop our own processors, and in my view, the point that he was making, our waters are very different from European waters. Anything that we buy from outside, the equipment is made, the technology that goes in is to suit their environmental condition. When you bring it here, whether it is for the Army, Navy or the Air Force, this environmental condition is different from, and in this regard, I think the best database available to anybody in the world is with us.
No, that was the point I was asking the commander.
That database is with us.
That database, which we can further enhance with INS Dhruv and others, is the mapping of the oceans.
Absolutely.
And mapping of the waters and the currents. This is an essential. Now, are we comfortable already with, I know always there's scope for improvement, but briefly, are we comfortable with what I have always harped on, our strategic space and the mapping of that, Africa to Malacca?
Absolutely. I mean, Navy has initiated a lot of things. I mean, DRDO is a partner and DRDO is doing a lot. And now Dhruv is a very, very important initiative, and its Navy is completely part of the whole process. And when the data, I mean, we have to also appreciate when Dhruv starts collecting data, it will be at a very, very different scale. So that capability to be able to handle that kind of data is again a very, very different paradigm we are talking about. And the human resource investment that Navy has done over such a long time, I think is going to come very handy, because these are very specialized areas. And you cannot produce that kind of skills or that kind of capabilities in a very, very short time.
Right. I can only sum up with my little exposure to the Navy. I spent time on INS Virat at one stage while making a documentary on them and engaging with distinguished officers like the Admiral and others, that I think the Indian Navy operates at standards that even NATO admires.
Absolutely.
And I've seen letters of compliments to that effect. The second thing in favor of the Indian Navy is that the Indian Navy is the silent sentinel that we as citizens have not appreciated enough. But the future of India's role in geopolitics will be defined by the Indian Navy and its capacity. And to that extent, my hats off to all our sailors and, of course, to distinguished people like yourself. And until our next episode, thank you for being with us and thank you for watching. Goodbye.